Every now and again I see something and I look at it, and just by looking at it I think, that looks like a good idea. I should get one of those and try it out. And this is an example of one of those. It's called a Panel Max glue press, and it's made, not surprisingly, for gluing panels together. So I've acquired one, and I thought I might share my experience with you. So first of all, let me describe the parts. The basic clamp itself, of which there are three, consists of two side pressure bars, a top pressure assembly, which is this guy here, and a bottom pressure block assembly, which is this one down here. Now the whole idea behind the thing, and the thing that got me excited, was the idea that as you applied pressure to the top of the clamp, the sides would come in and the top and bottom would come down. So that got me thinking that if every piece of timber is dimensioned exactly the same, then it must square them up exactly. It couldn't be any other way. So that was my reasoning. So when I opened the packet, or the box, these are all the bits I got. It's all nicely packaged in foam. And the first bit I pulled out was this, which is the sliding bar that you mount on the wall that the clamps are actually attached to. And here's another great idea, and one of the other things that got me in was the fact that the clamps are attached to a wall. Now, I sort of thought, well, my normal clamps that I use, and I've got a set of bar clamps and some parallel action clamps, they're also hanging on the wall, and they're behind the camera over there. But that's only when they're not in use, like these. When they're not in use, they're hanging on the wall. When those ones are in use, then typically they're taking up somewhere, some piece of space, a horizontal piece of space in my workshop. And because my shop is not very big, then typically I'll use the top of the table saw and the outfeed table. And that really means that when that's happening, I don't get to do much else in the workshop. If the job's only small, and let's think about how we would normally do it if we didn't have a system like this. Typically I'd use bar clamps or parallel action clamps, which I now have, and I would glue up in this direction, in this example, and then I'd probably put some cawls across here and then clamp down a couple of times across the cawls. So if the job's only small, so say for example I was doing a cutting board, then I can easily do it on top of the table saw, and then when I finish clamping it all together, I'll just take it outside and get the use of the saw again. But what happens if you're doing a big job? Now recently I made a top to a desk, and it would have been probably close to 2 meters long, maybe even more, and probably, I don't know, what's that, about 900 wide. So I used every clamp I've got, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I had 4 clamps going across it, on the bottom, and then 3 clamps between them on the top. And then as well as that, I had a number of G clamps, or not G clamps, F clamps, for the call. So I had 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So in all, I used 11 clamps. So that leads me on to a thought about the cost of these clamps. These clamps, at first glance, look relatively expensive, but then when I thought about gluing up that desktop, and in fact this would apply to any large panel glue up operation, I used 7 clamps, which were all over 1 meter long, and I used 4 F clamps. Now if you were to buy good quality clamps, I did a little bit of a search this morning on Bessie clamps that would have done the job. So we've got 7 1 meter Bessie parallel clamps at $110 each on eBay. And then we've got 4 300 mil Bessie parallel clamps for the calls at $73 a pop. So that was a total of $952 in clamps just to clamp up that job. Now, when I compare the cost of these to the cost of that, it makes these suddenly seem very affordable. So, going back to when I opened the box, the first thing it told me to do was mount the mounting rail on a wall a certain height above the floor, which was 4 foot 1 inches, Now this is really fun. 4 foot 1 inches, 4 foot 5.5 inches. This is really funny because I have no idea what 4 foot 5.5 inches is in metric without doing some kind of conversion. But fortunately, I have an old tape measure that I've had since I was about 20 that has still got feet and inches on it as well as metric. So that gave me a chance to say to my wife, well, you know, you told me to throw this away, but I told you there'd be a use for it. Here's the use for it. So I measured out 4 foot 5.5 or whatever it is on the wall, except that I don't have a wall. So what I had to do was I had to take a piece of plywood, and then I put some legs on it because the plywood wasn't actually big enough. So I put some legs on it, and then I mounted a couple of pieces of, I think it says 3x4, these are actually 3x2, which give you the necessary backing so that the clamp itself sits straight and hangs off the wall. So once I mounted them, then I had a look at it, and I still thought this is a great idea. So you'll notice that I've already got some wood mounted in this one. These are pieces of timber that have been through the thicknesser, so presumably they're all exactly the same size. And when I run my fingers down here like that, I do feel a couple of transitions where one timber goes into the next timber, but I don't think that's the fault of the clamp. I think it's the fault of the timber itself, which is probably hasn't been jointed properly. I didn't intend them to be used for this sort of purpose, so I haven't done a particularly good job of it. But by and large, the clamps themselves have done a fantastic job of putting it all together, and it makes it so easy compared to the alternative. So let me just take it apart first of all, and you can see what it looks like. So there's it. I have to go back to the terminology here. This is the top pressure assembly. So I'll just undo that, and when we do that, and sit over the back like that so it doesn't flop forward. And then this will come out as soon as I've undone this one, because I just realised it's the wood holding it all together. So I undo this one as well, pop it up the back, then I can bring these forward, and as you can see, I haven't used glue on these, so I can actually remove the wood. So of course, one of the great things about this system is if you were in actual fact gluing up this, all you do is put these down on a work surface somewhere, on your bench or something, and then you roll glue onto them, and then you just mount them down like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you rock this forward, bring these little guys into play, and tighten down the clamps. And really that's all there is to it. As you tighten the clamps, these two guys pull up, and the ones down the bottom are the opposing force. And as they pull up, they bring these bars in together, and everything lines up by itself. There's nothing really you have to do. One of the other things, I did say before that I can feel a slight transition between some of the boards. The other thing you have to take into account is that if you're doing it for real, you'd have glue on these surfaces, and the glue provides plenty of slip, whereas now I don't have glue, and of course there's friction, so I don't have any slip. But even so, it's doing a fantastic job. So what else can I tell you about them? You know, the design is really, really clever. It seems like such a simple idea, yet I found it really difficult finding YouTube videos to describe this process. There's a couple out there, and there's one in particular that is just a series of slides spoken by a woman who explains it all as she goes through, and it gives you a particularly good idea of it. I'll try and put a link to that in the description below this video. The other thing I liked about it was this space-saving design. Even though I don't have a wall, I have this, which can be put out of the way somewhere, and when I want to use it, I've just got it clamped in a doorway here with a clamp. That's all I need. I like the fact that these are self-centering. I like the fact that it has an even distribution of pressure both on the top and on the bottom. And I like the fact that according to the documentation, this exerts 8,000 kilopascals of pressure all round. So what the hell is that? What is 8,000 kilopascals of pressure? It sounds to me like, you know, the sort of figures they talk about when they're talking about the strength of the jaws of a crocodile or a great white shark or something. But anyway, there it is. There's the numbers, 8,000 kilopascals. The other thing I like is the quality of them. They're made from aluminium. That is the bars and the support bracket. The business end itself and the pressure thing at the bottom, they're made of really heavy chrome steel, so I don't think there'd be any problems about corrosion or anything like that. So you might be thinking like I was thinking, that if these only do panels, how many panels do you actually do? You know, I told you that I'd already made a desktop. Apart from that, I can't think in living memory when I've made anything really big, but I do make a lot of things like this, and that's a perfect application for it. Only the other day I made a shelf about so big to go in a shelving unit. I didn't have quite enough melamine to go the full distance, so I put like a breadboard end on either end, and I clamped them up using my parallel clamps. But unfortunately, just like when you're clamping any sort of panel together, when you clamp up something like that, most of the pressure comes across where the bar is, which in my case was on the bottom. So when I actually took the shelf out of the clamps, then the two breadboards on either end were slightly down a little bit, like it had actually created a bow in the middle, which is what they say happens. The other good thing about them is when it comes to the width of something that you can glue, they can glue up to 120 millimeters, which I'm guessing is about something like that. And as far as the length goes, well, really it's unlimited. One like this can do a panel up to about 1.3 meters. If you wanted to go double that, then you just buy another extension to go on here, and then some more of these clamps, and you know, you can keep going. I saw one on a video the other day where I think he had 8 clamps, and he had it on a movable trolley so that he could just wheel it in, glue up his panels and put it away somewhere to cure. The other thing that really impressed me about it was previously I'd glued up some of this. Now this is Nervo, but it's only 8 millimeters thick, and it did it perfectly. So what I plan to do in a subsequent video is I'm going to actually apply glue to them, put it in the clamp and let it cure, and then see what the result looks like. But what I saw when it was sitting in there like this was that everything was perfectly straight. There were no gaps on either side. It just looked great, and I just can't imagine how difficult that would be in a normal clamping situation where you're using coils. I don't think you'd have anywhere near the chance to do such a good job on it as this thing does. One of the potential difficulties I did see with it though is because you have one of these every, and they're saying 300 millimeters, I reckon you could do up to 400 in between them. So if you've got one somewhere in between 300 and 400s apart, when you've got glue squeeze out, then I could see how you wouldn't be able to get behind the clamp to clear that out. But in my case, what I normally do is I would normally let it go for about 30 minutes to set. Then I'd clean off the glue, which is now solidified a little bit, with a sharp chisel. So I suspect that wouldn't be a bad way to fly with one of these as well. So give it that 30 minutes and then undo it, take it out, clean the glue off, or even perhaps shift it a little bit in the clamps themselves so that you can get in there and get the glue off, then clamp it back down and let it set the rest of the way. Start a kit like this, that's what this is. It comes with 3 clamps. As I said, if you want to make it any longer, then you just add more kit onto it. You can buy these in singles or in multiples. I think these just come in one length. So that's my experience with it. I have to say I'm very, very impressed. Not many things get me excited, and this didn't, but I'm certainly interested in it and certainly looking forward to seeing where it goes. Now, I bought it on eBay. To do that, I searched for Panel Max glue press, and this came up right at the top of the list. And in fact, I bought it from a guy in Albury. His eBay name is David_bidding. I bought stuff from him before. He's a great operator. The stuff is quality stuff. It's delivered quickly, and the freight is low cost. So if you've got panels to glue up, I recommend you have a serious look at one of these. Thanks.